Everyone saw the headlines, but almost nobody noticed what happened next. A country had qualified for football's biggest stage, and yet, when the ceremony that would decide its World Cup path arrived, its top football officials were suddenly on the outside looking in. The 2026 World Cup draw in Washington was supposed to be a triumph. The first 48-team tournament, a showpiece at the Kennedy Center, and another carefully staged FIFA milestone on the road to a competition spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. FIFA wrapped the event in the language it always prefers when politics gets too close. Unity, welcome, celebration. But behind the lights, a different story was already unfolding, one that turned a glamorous draw into a case file about borders, power, and who really controls the World Cup. The official story at first sounded clean enough. FIFA announced that team delegations, partners, media, and fans would gather in Washington on December 5, 2025 for the draw, while the governing body's broader message remained, "Football unites the world." At roughly the same time, the United States was operating under a June 2025 proclamation that restricted entry from 19 countries, including Iran. But buried inside that proclamation was a crucial exception. Any athlete or member of an athletic team, including coaches and people performing a necessary support role traveling for the World Cup, Olympics, or another major sporting event, would not fall under the suspension. On paper, that looked like the safety valve, the legal line that would keep politics away from football, the sentence that was supposed to make the whole problem disappear. On November 28, 2025, just days before the draw, Iran's Football Federation announced it would boycott the ceremony. Reuters and AP reported that only part of the Iranian delegation had been granted visas. 4 were approved, including head coach Amir Galanoy. But Federation President Mehdi Taj was not. Iran's federation called the decision unsportsmanlike, said it was unrelated to sport, and said it had informed FIFA of its protest. That is the moment the story changed from a bureaucratic detail into something much darker. Because once a nation has qualified for the World Cup, the draw is not some optional gala. It is the event that decides the route, the groups, the opponents, the entire first chapter of the tournament. And suddenly, one qualified federation was saying it could not enter the room. Iran would technically be represented. The draw could proceed. Reuters reported that Iranian football officials traveled to Canada with official visas, only for the trip to collapse after what the federation described as unacceptable treatment by immigration officials at Toronto Airport. Reuters later reported that one member of the delegation had been denied entry, and a source said 2 others could still have attended Congress, but chose not to after that denial. AP then reported that Canadian officials effectively confirmed Taj was denied entry, with Canada's government stressing that IRGC officials are inadmissible to the country. At the Congress itself, Iran was marked absent during roll call. The draw controversy, in other words, was no longer a one-off embarrassment. It had become a pattern, and that is where the story split into 2 competing investigations. Critics of the host countries argued that football was being boxed in by politics. Reuters quoted Palestinian Football Association President Jibril Rajoub saying visa issues had clouded the Congress and warning against building walls between politics and sport. Iran's side began demanding guarantees from FIFA, visas, security, respect for the national flag and anthem, and assurances that the same humiliation would not happen again. Then, in early June, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said there was no problem with Iranian players entering the World Cup, but that the United States would not allow people with ties to the IRGC to embed themselves in the delegation under the cover of sport. Outside the Vancouver Congress, protesters chanted that the IRGC were terrorists and that FIFA should make no deal with them. So, the draw had not been the end of the case. It had been the warning shot, and by early June, the whole affair was impossible to dismiss as noise. Reuters reported that Iran's players received U.S. visas only 10 days before their opening match, while some key administrative staff were still waiting. AP then quoted Captain Ehsan Hajsafi after the squad arrived in Tijuana, saying visas had taken far too long and that important team officials, including managerial and media staff, were still missing. Iran would now prepare in Mexico and commute into the United States for World Cup matches in Los Angeles and Seattle. Think about what that really means. A qualified World Cup team would be allowed to play inside the host country, but not fully settle inside it. Not fully move as normal, not fully arrive on equal terms. That is not the standard World Cup image FIFA sells to the world. That is something more conditional, more fragile, more revealing. The controversy became so unstable that outsiders started imagining replacements. Italian officials rejected the idea, and FIFA did not act on it. But the fact that such speculation reached that level tells you everything about the mood around this case. Once a qualified nation's place starts sounding negotiable in public conversation, the damage is no longer just administrative, it is symbolic. And that brings us to the reveal at the center of the file. FIFA did not formally ban Iran from the World Cup draw. That is the technical truth. Iran remained qualified, sent a reduced delegation, and was eventually allowed to compete. But another truth sits right beside it. The president of a qualified federation was denied entry to the draw, blocked again ahead of FIFA Congress, and then watched as his team's base camp was pushed out of the United States while players waited until the final days for access. Sometimes in football, the scandal is not a secret payment or a leaked transfer call. Sometimes it is the invitation that cannot be used. And the unanswered questions are the ones that refuse to die. Did FIFA underestimate how fragile its promises were once border law collided with tournament logistics? Did the phrase necessary support role always have narrower limits than the public understood? Was Taj excluded because of IRGC links, because he did not fit the sporting carve-out, or because both realities merged into one? And if a host nation can decide which officials enter, where a team sleeps, and how long it may remain on its territory, then who truly owns the World Cup once the draw begins? FIFA or the states hosting it? Maybe it was security, maybe it was politics, maybe it was both. The truth was always there, hidden in plain sight. In football, the full story is rarely what it seems. The case remains open.